It's time to take a look at Madden 24 on the current gen consoles versus Madden 24 on last gen consoles. This is probably going to be the last year that Madden comes out on the older generations of console, PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So let's take a look at the two games this year and see what things are the same, what are the differences, and if old gen is even worth buying at all. Let's start with player likeness. That's one area where the old generation did get updates. All of the players like Austin Eckler, for example, that got new face scans in the game this year and new player likeness, they did also update it on old gen. Same for guys like Fred Warner. So if you're wondering about face scans and player likeness, those things will be updated on old gen, as you see here with Dameon Pierce also getting his likeness. Now obviously it's going to look better on the new generation because the graphics are way better, the player models are better, all this stuff is more detailed, so of course it's going to look better on new gen, but you do still get faces and body types updated on last gen to a certain degree. So just showing some comparisons here. Obviously on the left is old, on the right is the newer gen, and you're just seeing kind of the differences. Like Kyler Murray, for example, he got one of the bigger face scan player likeness upgrades this year, and it still looks decent on last gen, but it of course is going to look better on new. But they didn't kind of leave that out there. They didn't leave the old scans on last gen. So that is one of the few areas, and I do mean few areas, that last gen did get updates, and we'll go over as we go through the video the other areas that did get updated. Here we've got Justin Herbert. I mean, you can see a big deal on the new gen is the hair, of course, looks way more realistic, but you don't really see the hair much when playing, so it almost doesn't matter that much, honestly. It looks better when you're in the player card because it looks more realistic, but when you're actually on the field, it's not a big difference. You've got Aiden Hutchinson, who does have his signature eye black on new gen. They didn't put that on the old gen. Mike Evans, you could see here, his updated likeness on old and new as well, just showing the different comparisons. Looking at Patrick Mahomes, I mean, again, you look at the hair, big difference, but again, you don't see that while playing, so it doesn't matter. You see it in some cutscenes and stuff, but not a huge deal. Of course, old gen does still have the really big, bulky, wide shoulder pads. They've never changed that. This year on new gen, they did kind of bring the pads back to being a little bit bigger than last year, but they're not quite as bulky on most players as they are on old gen. Now we're looking at the rookie scans. They did update the rookie scans on last gen as well, the ones that are in the game so far, which is just a few guys, and I do think they will update that with the post-launch updates. They'll keep doing the face scans and things like that, but they're not gonna probably update too much more. You can see Bijan here. This one kinda looks weird, I ain't gonna lie. Zay Flowers looks a little crazy on old gen. His head looks like super big for some reason. I don't know if that's an accident or a bug, because none of the other players look like that. We also got the likeness update for Dan Campbell as well. That's also on old gen, so they didn't skip out on the coaches either. Now let's take a look at the pre-game presentation for old gen and new gen. So old gen is the exact same that it's been since Madden 21. That's the last time that it changed, and that's when we went over to new gen midway through the year, and they have never changed the presentation of old gen. It has stayed the same. So if you've played Madden 21, if you've been on 22, 23 old gen, the presentation stuff is still the same. This year, even for Madden 24 on new gen, they didn't really do much to the presentation. They added a few new shots, but they actually took some stuff away as well, so they made it shorter. So even on the newer consoles, they didn't really do nothing crazy with presentation either. It's kind of one of the bigger areas that they really skipped over this year, but if you're talking about old gen, it's been the same for what, third, fourth year in a row, so no changes there, unfortunately. Same thing goes for the Super Bowl intro presentation. Just like on current gen, it's going to be the same presentation as the regular game for the most part. There's a couple shots with the Lombardi trophy and things like that, but overall it is going to be the same presentation, and that has not changed on old gen either for a few years. And honestly, I've always hated this pregame that is on old gen now. Ever since they went to it in Madden 21, I never liked it, because it's like they're showing plays from the game that hasn't really happened yet, and I just never really got the whole idea or concept about this. It just never looked that good to me, so it's kind of a shame that that is the last time that they did update it for those consoles, because it just wasn't really a good change, and I think a lot of people agree with that, and they've just never changed it once moving over to the newer consoles. So that's still going to be the same on PS4 and Xbox One. Now let's get to the Super Bowl celebration. So yes, this has not changed either, and even on new gen, it's the same for like the third year in a row, but on old gen, this might be, what, the 10th year in a row, maybe? It's been the same on old gen for so long. It became a meme at one point a few years ago about how it hadn't changed in 4 or 5 years, and they have still never changed it. They changed it recently, a couple years back on the newer consoles, and that one has remained the same since Madden 22, but old gen is still the exact same on the left here as it's been since, I don't know, I mean, at least Madden 16, 17, it at least goes that far back. So it actually is pretty crazy. They haven't really updated a lot of stuff in terms of presentation and gameplay on old gen since they moved to the new consoles. They have kept the modes updated, which was one of the good things. They were still giving the franchise updates and the career mode updates and things like that, but they have not really touched presentation or gameplay, and that remains the same for this year as well. Now, if you're still here at this point of the video and you haven't subscribed yet, you might as well join the family and subscribe if you want to stay up to date on Madden and other football gaming news and content. I'm trying to reach 1 million subs one day. I need your help, and it will be greatly appreciated. Now let's look at the weather. The weather on old gen has been the same for as long as I can remember, and that has not changed this year either. It looks a little bit worse than next gen, but it's really nothing to write home about. They did update the weather when they moved to next gen a few years ago. They made it a little better, but to be honest, it's such a minimal difference that it's almost not even noticeable. It's a little bit different around the stadium, but on the field, it's really not anything too noticeable. Now, of course, we got to look at player movement. This has always been one of the biggest differences between both gens. The old gen movement is much faster. It's much more unrealistic. I mean, look right here as we're weaving in and out of the numbers. You basically can change direction on old gen and keep top speed, and it's not really a lot of realistic in the movement and the planning. You can see with the special moves like jukes and spins, it's much more exaggerated on old gen. It's much more just bigger cuts, bigger jumps. The spin isn't as bad, but the juke is more noticeable. But this has always been a thing. When they went to next gen, they redid player movement, and here, just to show the drastic difference of weaving in and out of the numbers, watch how much quicker I get to the end zone on the left than on the right. So some people like the old player movement better. I've always been one of those people, but it is more realistic on new gen, and that is one of the major gameplay differences. Now let's look at franchise mode, and unfortunately, this is the last year on old gen, so this also means this is really the year where they did not update the modes either. Franchise mode, from what I can tell, is the exact same as it was last year on old gen. Even the social media screen, which changed on new gen, they didn't even change that on old gen. So franchise mode is a complete copy paste, much like the gameplay on last gen. For example, the 6 trade slots that were added this year on current gen, that has not been updated either on last gen. So franchise mode is the exact same as it was last year. Gameplay is the exact same. Presentation, exact same. Here on the main menu, just to show you some other things, face of the franchise is still the career mode on old gen. It is not superstar mode like on current gen. It doesn't have superstar showdown either. It still has the yard. So if you like the yard, you can still play that on old gen. Training camp tab does not have mini games, so that is also not on the old gen consoles. Now, surprisingly, one thing they did add was the Riddell Axiom helmet. That is on the old gen as well as new gen, so they did give you that little piece of equipment, so that is one minor thing that they kept the same between both. Another piece of equipment they did add on old gen is the Addy 013 gloves, but they didn't add some of the other stuff that's on new gen, like the baggy sleeves and the Jordan 7 low cleats. In terms of things like the sidelines, those are still the exact same on old gen as well as they have been for many years. There's no real players on the sidelines still for the older consoles. Compared here to the newer consoles, which was updated a few years ago, where some players on the sideline are actual real players. They do still have generic players on the sideline mixed in as well, but you do see some of the bigger name players as their real selves on the sideline. So to sum it up, here are the things that are the same on both current gen and old gen. You get the updated rosters, of course. You get the updated X Factor and Superstar players. You get the updated player likeness and face scans. You get the updated scoreboard. You get the Riddell Axiom helmet and the Addy 013 gloves, and that's about it. That's the only thing that was updated on last gen. And the gameplay, as far as I can tell, is untouched, and it has been for years. The presentation, untouched and has been for years. Franchise mode, untouched. No superstar mode, no mini camp, no superstar showdown. So if you have Madden 23 on old gen, there's no reason to upgrade. Unless you're actually upgrading to current gen on the newer consoles, it makes no sense to get Madden 24, because you can just download an updated roster from the community files and just keep playing on Madden 23, because it's essentially 99% the same thing. Now, if you want to see the differences between Madden 24 and Madden 23, you can check out this video right here on the screen.